Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm a social studies educator, historian, and host of this, the Everything is a Primary Source podcast. I'm also an avid collector of popular culture artifacts. I love what I find at thrift store outlets, garage sale leftovers, and what I spot just making my way around the built world. I enjoy sorting through boxes of free books and magazines, not to mention online collections like Internet Archive, and of course the Library of Congress. But you don't need to spend your time digging through bins or following online rabbit holes to get a look into the past. The movies and TV we watch, the books we read, and the games we play are all documents of the past. So is fashion, food, music, toys, even the roads we travel on and the places we live and work in. Everything is a primary source. This podcast is the result of exhibiting these kinds of artifacts in public, getting passersby to select an item they connect with, and then chatting with me to see what it says about the time, place, and people who made it. The conversation you are about to hear, therefore, is your history, my history, our history, through popular culture. All right, Angela, how's it going at the conference so far?
It's going great. I found some really awesome learning opportunities, and I've been really enjoying it.
You're from Utah?
California originally, but I live in Utah now. I'm teaching Utah.
Have you been to Boston before?
No, this is my first time, and I'm loving it.
Do you like it, even despite the rain? Is it still raining out there?
No, it's actually a beautiful, clear day. I think it's supposed to rain later, but yeah, I've been enjoying it.
I've been in here all day, so I don't really know.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm excited because I want to go see the harbor. Like, I haven't seen anything besides outside this building and the subway.
So I grew up around here, but moved away when I was about 10 years old. And then I came back in high school. So I didn't go that far away. We came in for Model UN. And I remember looking back, and I feel so dumb. At nighttime, we went up to the Hancock Tower, and they have a great view of everything up there. And I asked the docent up there, I said, can you see the Atlantic Ocean from here? And she's like, yeah, it's right there.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm like, it's a seaport. How do you not know? I was so mad at I'm still mad at myself, 16-year-old self.
Yeah.
Like, how do you not know?
Well, I'll make sure not to make the same mistake.
Yeah, it's definitely on the ocean. Like, we're clear on that now. So, how long have you been teaching for?
This is my 5th year.
You like it?
Yeah, I love it. I love teenagers. That's why I teach high school. I don't think I could be a middle school or an elementary school teacher. So, it's been one of the best decisions I've made, and going on 5 years, 6 years, hopefully.
What brought you to the profession?
I was in college, actually, and I wanted to do news and journalism. That's what I did for an entire year. And I thought, this kind of sucks. I didn't really like it. It wasn't anything that really spoke to me, but I took a careers class, and I was always told I'd be a good teacher, and I was like, maybe I should explore this route, and I explored it, and I thought, you know what, I actually think not only would I enjoy this, but I'd be pretty darn good at it too, and I just went down that route, and then everything since then has led to my education path, so it's been awesome.
I've met a few people who have dabbled in both fields, news reporting. I even had I knew of a teacher, a science teacher at a nearby school where I went to high school that was also the weekend weatherman for the local TV station. So it's not the qualities that you need to be successful in broadcast reporting and in teaching are very similar.
Totally, and that's why I thought that maybe I wouldn't enjoy it. But for whatever reason, just the type of writing, because journalistic writing is totally different than writing an essay or anything else that you could consider.
Yeah,
and it just wasn't. I was like, it didn't captivate me like I thought it would.
You are, though, what kind of classes do you teach?
So I teach U.S. history. I teach right after Reconstruction with the Industrial Revolution all the way to modern day. And then I teach world history all the way from Neanderthals to modern day in 1 year. So
that's a task, but it's not impossible.
Correct.
As you've proven, I'm sure.
Do you feel that in some ways, and maybe we're informed by the way the news media has been part of our life forever, but when you're delivering a lesson, do you ever feel that it's informed in some ways by kind of the cadence of the way news is delivered, where you have intro, here's what we're doing today, and then, kind of segmented like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. You have to have a hook in order to introduce something to your kids and to get them captivated on something, and then you got the meat of the story and the meat of the things that you want to tell them. So, yeah, I think you can definitely make that correlation. I think it definitely fits.
Since you've been teaching for 5 years, in the early stages of it, you might not have a lot to compare to as far as, in my first 5 years of teaching, and now I'm in my 30th.
Right.
But that's been a pretty tumultuous 5 years.
Absolutely. I mean, I got hired, I guess this is kind of going down a route, but I was doing my student teaching 2020 in March, and I actually had the interview with my principal at the school that I was student teaching at. I got offered the job for the following school year, and an hour later, the school's closed for 2 weeks.
An hour later?
Yeah, literally an hour later. And then we know that 2 weeks went on for months and months. And so, I literally started off within the first hour of being hired with COVID.
That was your world. That's where you started.
Absolutely.
You can say, and so from that, I assume you're remote learning.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember the vice principal coming in and saying that this kid has COVID and pulling out his measuring tape and doing a 360, and any student that was within 6 feet within a circle of that student was mandated to not come to school, and they had to do remote learning. And then eventually we closed the schools altogether. So, yeah, I'm definitely glad that we have gotten away from that. And
you don't have to tell me.
Yeah, and so remote learning is definitely not like the thing, but it was for a long time, and I'm glad to be over with it.
Do you feel like you maybe took some pieces of that with you, though? I know, for example, a lot of us, we were just talking about it earlier, like for our council, for example, because of the normalization of online Zoom meetings and stuff like that, we can actually have regular meetings when before that was a popularized thing. We couldn't do that. You would have to meet in an actual physical place. And so likewise with our actual teaching discipline and our methods and everything like that, do you feel like now that we're been in person for a couple of years again, are there any things left over from that era that you continue to utilize in your teaching?
Yeah, I mean, I was in high school over 10 years ago, and if you missed a day, the teacher basically would say, turn to your friend and get the notes from them and figure out what we did, like don't come and talk to me. And I put everything on Canvas, so the kids at any point, they could go back 2 months from today and look at what starter we did, what notes we did, what activity we did. Like, it's literally all accessible. They could print it off at home. So those things have made it, and I think the kids would argue for worse, there's not really snow days anymore, like learning is accessible at any point of the year, and I think, there's definitely some benefits from that, and I think I've taken that in my teaching, and it's definitely made it more accessible, especially for my kids who have major traumatic events that might happen in their life that force them to not come to school, and they can continue learning.
I know school attendance has taken a hit, and I think part of that is because of those kinds of resources that are available, so it's not as big of a deal.
Correct.
And
my
so
goodness.
when parents are trying to decide everything from, you can't make a decision about an emergency situation, but sometimes you have the family that goes on vacation when it's more suitable for their schedule than the school's. But that decision is made easier by, you just have online learning. You just go get your assignments by logging into Canvas or...
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's honestly, it's a rare sight if I see every single one of my students in my classroom on a given day. And I don't even think I had 2 days in a row where that has taken place. I teach 4 periods on A day and 3 periods on B day. And so, there's definitely a lot of kids that are missing. And, but you can also argue that families can have time together and opportunities to go and travel and still get learning done.
Yeah.
Like, there's definitely benefits, pros and cons to it, I think, for sure.
I think the last thing I want to ask you about then, because that really does kind of continue with an idea I've been dwelling on for a while. Do you foresee those kinds of traits altering, transforming even what public education looks like? That we might get to an era not too far away from now where there is, in fact, more of a piecemeal, buffet style, even for in-person learning experience, almost like a college campus where... I even have kids right now. I mean, in my district, we didn't have an online school. But then with COVID, we had an online high school. And you have kids already who can literally choose to come, like on when we went to college, and you could go to college on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or you could go Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like, you could choose your classes. And so you have kids who are doing literally half online and half in school, and that's what they can do. So yeah, I mean, I can definitely see how education is going to kind of make a turning point where we might not have kids in the physical classroom for very much longer. Kind of like the kids in the Grapes of Wrath. They're on the
Good
road.
segue.
They leave from their home in Oklahoma, right, and head out to California, where there's definitely
Right.
jobs. I should make a better segue of that for when I put it as a podcast. But of all the pop culture things that I have listed on my table, that's the one you gravitated to.
Yes.
How come? What's about the Grapes of Wrath that you...
Yeah. Well, prior to when I was a teacher and I could, read a historical fiction book and, or, nonfiction, I guess, whatever. When I could read one of those books and truly understand it in high school, I was totally a spark noter. I would get a book and I would just spark notes it. But I remember talking to my English teacher and him saying to me, I want you to read this book from front to back and I guarantee you're going to love it. And so I remember, even though all my friends were spark noting that book, that it was the one book in high school, the first one, I should say, where I read it front to back, cover to cover, and truly understood it, really enjoyed it. And so it's like my connection. So I can kind of see where my kids are coming from if I give them a primary source or a book, and they don't want to read it. I was there, but I always tell them, like, just give it a shot and you might just like it.
There's a reason why these things are taught in school.
Yeah, right.
They don't usually give us rubbish.
Totally.
So the question I have for the Grapes of Wrath, and we could look at it both the book and the movie, because, where was it made, / what locations are associated with it? So you're originally from California.
Correct.
California is kind of like the promised land in this story, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it is, right? I mean, that's where they're trying to head through the Dust Bowl that's taking place and traveling across the Great Plains. And, I wonder if they'd be disappointed when they get there, right? But, definitely the locations are associated. Great Plains, Oklahoma, California.
The whole Southwest. Route 66 is what they take to get there. What part of California are you from?
So I'm actually right along Route 66. Okay. I'm from Rancho Cucamonga in Southern California. And
I love the sound of that place.
I know. I call it Rancho Chimichanga sometimes. But yeah, Route 66 literally travels right through it. And
the original McDonald's is along there in San Bernardino.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Well, and that's the county I'm from, so that makes sense.
You know the McDonald's brothers are from New Hampshire?
No, that is definitely a cool fact.
One of them, I forget which one, but is interred in Goffstown, New Hampshire. And I've been to it's a mausoleum, and you can spot his entry because it has the McDonald's arches there.
Okay.
But, they're originally from there, but they went to California, actually probably about 10 years before the Jodes in the Grapes of Wrath do, but for similar reasons. California is the promised land. Being a native Californian, where born and raised,
yes.
Do you see the West Coast the same way that those of us from other parts of the country see the West Coast as? This promised land, this golden coast, a place to to reinvent yourself or have a new opportunity that you didn't have before?
I think as a history teacher, I definitely think it was. And maybe you can even argue still is. I think that just like any state, there's good and bad, but the opportunities for people there, it's definitely there. I mean, if you want to be able to buy a house, maybe not. If you want to be able to afford to go out to eat, maybe not. But it's a beautiful place. The people are kind, and
I had my first visit, not this summer, but last summer. I'd never been to California ever.
Oh, okay.
I went there a year and a half ago. Beautiful. I just couldn't get over. I said, if I save up $2 million, I would like to retire here because then I could buy a little house somewhere.
I know.
Yeah.
Little house is definitely the way I would phrase it.
I mean, Los Angeles was, it was mind-boggling, but it was a marvel. I just couldn't get over that. Driving up and down the coast.
Right.
Beautiful. I just thought it was incredible. I can understand why just the geography alone would give people a sense of new. But it must be just such a different perspective from somebody who's from there.
Yeah, and I love California. But I couldn't ever be a teacher in California unless my husband made a lot of money. And my parents who still live there, they're looking to move. But their house is their retirement plan. So I think if you were there in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, and you were able to buy a home and establish yourself, you're kind of set. But I can definitely understand how people get really frustrated with Californians and the idea that they gain so much equity in their home and they make all this money and then they go to other places and they can buy out and increase the price of rent and housing prices. California definitely gets a bad name for that. But I'm also very protective. If I have people in Utah who say California stinks, I don't like this, blah, blah, blah. I say, have you ever even been?
Right.
Or you can just listen to everything that you hear on the news. But, I have physically lived there and it is a great place and I can see why people wanted to go there.
Another thing that people might not even recognize is that Utah, while far away from California technically, is still part of that general zone of the Southwest.
The West, for sure.
And it's a much more urban area than a lot of people think, because when we think of urban versus rural, you think about, there's so much wide open space in the desert. Of course it's rural. But I'm like, no, rural actually means people live there and do rural things. If nobody's there, it's not anything. It's nothingness. Right. So it's actually very urban because the vast majority of the population lives in places, cities and towns. And so Utah, Colorado, Nevada, all those, Arizona, New Mexico, California, parts of Texas have that shared quality.
Right.
But California has the added element of a Pacific coast.
Totally. And California is definitely different from Utah. But for someone like me who's only lived in the West, you have West Coast and then you have the West. But I would say they're definitely all similar. Anything west of Colorado is the West for sure.
When you were telling people you were coming out to Boston,
oh yeah,
did you say back east or just going east?
I said I'm going east.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
East Coast.
That term back east, I think, is always from people who go to the West Coast.
And then they're going back to their house.
But they're originally from here.
Yeah.
Right. All the actors and stuff from Boston are
right.
Or related things. I like going on IMDb, Internet Movie Database. One thing I've noticed on there is the modern generation of actors, I would say maybe the last 70 years even, when you see their birthplaces, a lot of them Southern California.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They're from there, and that's the world that they know. Their families might be from other parts of the country originally, but and maybe went out to chase that dream, or kind of like what the Jodes did, went out to California because that was opportunity.
Right.
They didn't have that opportunity either because their farm was blowing away.
Right.
Or, they had kind of sights set on being a movie star, getting involved in show business somehow, and they move out to California. But once they start a family line there, to those people that are in hugging the coast of California. It's no longer back east.
Right.
It's just
yeah.
it's the other coast. It's the east.
Yeah.
You know, and does the East have any kind of mythology to people on the West Coast? There's places like Boston, New York, Philadelphia.
Well, I can just say from my perspective, when I think of, East Coast, I definitely think of New England, historical. The furthest east I had ever been was New York City, and I think New York is rather different than anywhere I've ever been.
Like tricorn hats,
Yeah.
everybody is...
No, seriously, when I think of Boston, I mean, I said, and I don't know if this happens, but I said, man, I'm sure I could make a killing, like, selling tea bags by the harbor, right?
Yeah.
Like, and just having people pour their tea into the harbor. Like, that's what we think of as, like, screw you, England, like,
old, like 18th century. It's forever.
Like, we love America. I actually said, how could you not be patriotic, like, living in a place like this? That's how I feel, because it's like the backbone of American history. And California, you don't really have. Utah, you got the pioneers, but that's about what you have.
The best 4th of July parade I've ever seen was in Solvang, California, a year and a half ago. Because 4th of July, I know it's Philadelphia, but the Revolutionary War, 18th century, American independence is everything around here, right?
Right.
These colonies had a hand in it. So we are familiar with 4th of July goes like this. You have a parade sometime in the late morning, and it's full of fifes and drums and people dressed in continental, soldier, shooting off guns.
Right.
And you might even go to a site that has some kind of relationship to it. It's very traditional stuff. In California, it's a holiday, Independence Day, but since they don't have that heritage, it was fantastic. It was mariachi bands and horse farms and ranchos and actual cowboys, and I'm like, this is great.
I couldn't even tell you.
And then Danish stuff because it's Solvang. So
yeah, well, I couldn't even tell you something that I did during 4th of July that involved Paul Revere or George Washington or I can't
Jefferson.
even. Yeah, I literally can't
macaroni
even
and cheese,
think of anything like that. It's literally in my city you couldn't light off fireworks, but you would go up and see the valley and see all the fireworks. But that was what it was. It was just yay, go America, but it wasn't anything historical like you would probably have here.
It's amazing what the Grapes of Wrath can do to, and I believe they derive the title of that book from the Battle Hymn of the Republic, the Civil War, see, coming of the Lord, and the great trampling out the vintage, the Grapes of Wrath restored.
Yeah.
And it really does kind of make it full circle, and therefore California maybe even has its 100 years after it was created as a state, its final solidification as part of the Union and part of the American story.
Yeah.
I'll end with this because I know you got to get going to other things. I remember seeing Elton John, the video of him inducting the Beach Boys to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he said, growing up in England, when he thought of America, he thought of the Beach Boys. And they were America to him. And I'm like, that's incredible. You go from England across the entirety of the entire United States, and it's if you go a little bit further west in Hawthorne, California, where they're from, you're in the Pacific Ocean.
Right.
And that's what you think of as America.
Yeah.
But by that point, that was America.
Right. Well, hey, I'm sure if you asked anyone, what they think of America, they think of New York, California, or Texas.
Yep.
And that's probably what they think of.
Maybe Disney World, Disneyland.
I guess you're right. Yeah, maybe.
Angela, thank you so much. I appreciate your insights, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Popular culture, by definition, connects and unites us, and proves that people of different backgrounds, in fact, have a lot in common with one another. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, at least in part, for that reason. If it connects with you and you'd like to add to it, or any of the podcast episodes, just visit everything-history.com and search for the Everything is a Primary Source project, which can be found in the classroom section of the website. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Be sure to rate and share this podcast wherever you are listening to it now, and follow Everything as a Primary Source on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. Thank you for listening to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source.